Well, good evening, everyone. And here we are in London's West End. And this is July 4th, Independence Day. Thank you. Have a lovely, lovely July 4th, wherever you are in the world. Maybe you live in the US, maybe you live other parts of the world. Maybe you're eating hot dogs, maybe you have fireworks, maybe you're just celebrating in your own way. And what better way to start a tour in the West End, a wander on July 4th, than being in front of the Canadian Embassy or High Commission, and then just to the right of the centre, we have New Zealand House. It's dark at the moment. It's been a rainy, rainy day. But just to let you know something, the actual day and the actual weather today, it's pouring with rain. 90% coverage in London, thunderstorms, breezy as well. But we've had a good few days, so we can't really complain. The hottest June on record. And so what I've done is record a video, the actual visuals, and now my narration is live here on July 4th. I really hope you're going to enjoy this little walk. We're going to go up into Piccadilly, a little bit around and about towards Leicester Square, Chinatown area. We're really celebrating the United States of America, USA. We're celebrating the Liberty Bell. We're celebrating hot dog eating contests. The flag, celebrating John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, John Hancock, the Star-Spangled Banner, One World Trade Center, George Washington, New England. A lot to celebrate on this great day. This is the Haymarket Hotel, and we're coming up to a road which was originally a hay market. It sold farming supplies many years ago. Just on the other side of Trafalgar Square, there are two theatres on the Haymarket. The first one we're going to see as we come round to the corner is now known as His Majesty's Theatre. It opened originally in 1797, and there's been a few restorations over the years, most famously known by visitors to London from all over the world as the home of Phantom of the Opera since 1986. The theatre changes name depending on the monarch. You have a Her Majesty's, a His Majesty's, a Her Majesty's, and now it is renamed because of our present King, Charles III, His Majesty's Theatre. One of the oldest theatres in the West End by name, not one of the largest, strangely. It's got this enormous frontage. It does look beautiful with the recessed lighting, but it only holds about 1,300 people. The largest theatre in the West End is the Colosseum Theatre, London's Colosseum, which opened in 1904, home to the English National Opera. The second largest is the London Palladium, with about 2,300. So both of those theatres, and Drury Lane, of course, in Covent Garden, hold around 900 more than this place. But it's got an elegant front to it. The front is mainly from the 1890s, and it is really the show in the West End that sells out more than any. The two West End shows where if you ask people on tours or ask visitors to London, what shows are you seeing? The two most popular are Phantom of the Opera and Wicked. The third most popular is Les Miserables. Les Miserables is the longest running show or musical in the West End, which opened in 1985. The longest running show of any kind in the West End is The Mousetrap, Dame Agatha Christie's wonderful crime drama, which opened in 1952 and then opened at the Ambassadors Theatre and then moved in the 1970s across the road to the St. Martin's. It's been running for 71 years in the West End. This is the Theatre Royal Haymarket. There are many Theatre Royals in the West End. The most popular and the most famous is the Theatre Royal Drury Lane, which is the oldest operating theatre in the West End from 1663. This building opened in around 1820. By 1821, it was known as the Theatre Royal Haymarket. I did a play here not too long ago based on a wonderful American film named Fatal Attraction, starring Bonnie Bedelia and Glenn Close and the wonderful Michael Douglas. Glenn Close steals the film. She plays the bunny boiler. She plays a woman who has a one-night stand with a married man. The married man tries to get on with his life, but maybe, let's say he gets stalked by this woman. Now we look at this film differently over the years. In the beginning, she was the villain, and you felt sorry for poor Mr. Douglas. But he was just as much to blame, if not more so. He lured in Glenn Close's character, and she had her issues anyway. And he pretended that he loved her, and that's how he got her where he wanted. And then one night, the middle of the night, he decided that everything was over, it was all fine, she wasn't going to be in contact again. He bought his daughter a bunny, small little rabbit. Everything was going fine. They had moved to a new house. And then his wife, she feels and senses bubbling from the kitchen in the middle of the night. And she goes down, and the bunny is in a pot on the stove. It's where we get the phrase bunny boiler. The whole thing goes from that to a lot worse. And it all happened here at the Theatre Royal Haymarket. I didn't play the bunny. The bunny, they used two rabbits, two bunnies in the show, because animals have rights. And they had their own dressing room at the top of the theatre. When I was in this play and I played a few small roles, I had to share my dressing room with 6 other guys. I'm not being bitter, but this is the way it is in the acting profession. Things are different in the US. If you travel from the UK to the US, you get cast in a play. I know many of my friends have been in West End shows which have transferred. I've never done that personally. I've been in shows in the West End where the producers say, we're planning to go to Broadway and bring the cast. And one of the plays I was in 1984, based on the George Orwell novel, did transfer to Broadway, but they recast the entire play. But many of my friends have gone to Broadway. The thing is, in the UK, if you're based in London, they pay you, but you've got to pay your own travel. Still, you're paying your accommodation, your rent, your mortgage. But if they transfer you to Broadway, they give you an apartment, normally in Manhattan, not too far out from where the Broadway theatres are. And the pay, I'm sad to say, is about twice as much, even adjusting for inflation, as it is in the West End. Of course, it's all reflected in the ticket prices. If you go to a theatre in London, chances are that you could probably get a ticket for £20-25 for quite a few of the West End shows if you're willing to book last minute and maybe you don't particularly want to see a specific show. You might be able to go to the TKTS ticket booth. They have a few of those in New York as well. Theatre is big in London. People often come here and they are seeing shows. 90% of the people I ask that visit London are staying in the West End. Even if they haven't booked a show, they will come to see a show and they will eventually get drawn round by the bright lights. There are 43 West End theatres, so way more than Broadway. And the American theatres, a lot of them, the lobbies, the foyers, are not that big. You basically queue out on the street and then you go in and the auditoriums are phenomenal. But in the West End, often people arrived 3-4 hours before a show. There might be a dance, there might be pre-show entertainment. Some of it was going on in the lobby, in the foyer. Most of the theatres in London were built in the early 1900s. There's a period from about 1895 to 1908 when 14 West End theatres opened. 12 of them are still running to this very day. This was Edwardian London. In New York, in America, the Gilded Age. People were starting to go out more. More people in the country were learning to read and write. Books were very expensive before that in both London and New York. And suddenly, people are learning to read and write, but they can't afford books. So the prices of the theatres dropped dramatically. The theatres knew that they wanted to get the audiences in. They wanted to get the educated people, and there were more of them in America and in England. How did they get them in? They invented a new form of entertainment. In London, we call it variety, sketch shows, revues, cabarets. In the United States, it was known as vaudeville. And there is actually a vaudeville theatre about 5 minutes walk from where we're standing. Vaudeville was everything for everyone. People could pay to watch an hour of a show, often a show full of sketches and cabarets, dancing girls, performing animals, jugglers, clowns, comedians. A 5-act show would have 4 intermissions. And often more novelty acts would turn up and try and entertain people during the intermissions. Those people that were booked for the intermissions, for the breaks, they didn't get paid. They queued up for 5-minute slots. Often they weren't given any guarantee that they would get on stage at all. If they did get on stage, they got paid. The side curtains in a lot of the theatres in London are called the legs of the stage. And people would often say to each other in that queue, I hope I break a leg tonight. Meaning, I hope I walk past the leg of the stage and get on stage to do my 5-minute act, because if I do that, I get paid. So the breaking of the leg was simply somebody saying, I hope I get paid. We say it in the States as well. Other countries do take this literally, though. The phrase break a leg in German gets translated to break your neck and leg. I think that's a bit harsh. My Polish theatre friend, she says, when they wish good luck in Polish theatre, they say go to hell. In Italian, they say in bocca al lupo, which means in the mouth of the wolf. And in French and Spanish, they use a word merda. And in Spanish, they say mucho merda, which means a lot of horse manure, a lot of doo-doo, a lot of poo-poo. In both Spain and France, when aristocracy went to the theatre, they went on horseback. And if you went to the theatre on horseback, you were rich. So, if you owned a theatre and you looked out the window from the lobby, from the upstairs bar, and you saw a lot of horses and a lot of horse muck below, you knew that you were going to make good money that night. So theatre superstitions all over the world abound. In the United States, the idea of a ghost light is quite popular. Some people think that it's to keep the ghosts company at night. In a theatre, there's often a lamp just without a shade, on a little lampshade stick type thing on the stage, a small bulb, only a small amount of light. And it's supposed to say to the ghosts, look, we're going to look after you at night. We'll give you a little light. We're thinking of you. But the idea of a ghost light came from this country. And it started in the 1970s when we had many power cuts power outages in London. A lot of the theatres would close at night. Sometimes they wouldn't know until half an hour before the show that the show was not going to go on. If backstage crew, and of course we say crew because it was originally the crew of the ships, that's why we say lighting rig, scenery dock, when they came in of an evening, if it was dark, or a morning when it was dark, all the lights in a theatre wouldn't need to be turned on. You wouldn't have to waste power, which was precious anyway in the 1970s. All you would need to look at is the stage. And if you saw that one simple bulb on, you knew that the power was working and you could get on with your work and the show would go on that afternoon or evening. The view in front of us is the great Piccadilly Circus. When people say, "I'll meet you in Piccadilly," that can be confusing because Piccadilly is actually a road which leads from here all the way down to Buckingham Palace and Hyde Park. This is Piccadilly Circus. There are a few major streets, roads, lanes, avenues leading off Piccadilly Circus. One of them is Shaftesbury Avenue to the right. The building in front of us used to be a record shop, came from America, Tower Records. I came here in the 1980s and 90s. Now it's offices and other retail places. The Regent Palace Hotel is not far from here, had over 1,000 rooms, a lot of them in the early days with communal toilets. These are the lights of Piccadilly Circus, a baby brother to Times Square. People often say, if somewhere's busy in London, it's like Piccadilly Circus here. It's that busy. And they say if you stand in Piccadilly Circus long enough, you will eventually bump into every person you've ever known. It's a busy place. It's a thoroughfare to many different roads, Regent Street, Piccadilly, Haymarket, Shaftesbury Avenue, that lead to other parts of the West End. You could say here we're in the centre of the West End, but we're kind of not. We're on the west of the West End. The centre part of central London is actually a statue of Charles I in Trafalgar Square. And that statue, wherever you are in the United Kingdom, if you say, "I'm 38 miles, or I'm 150 miles, or I'm 407 miles from London," you are measuring your location all the way to that statue in Trafalgar Square. Piccadilly is actually named after a man who sold a certain type of garment here in the 1600s. His name was Robert Baker. He invented something that we now call a ruff, R-U-F-F. It was a starched collar which you wore around your neck, very popular in Tudor times and a bit after that. But they used to call them Piccadills, and it was a fashion from the Netherlands, or what was Holland. And he bought a shop here in the early 1600s. And it wasn't known as Piccadilly back then. And he'd said, well, it's going to be popular. People laughed at him. They thought this strange Dutch fashion would never take on. And look at it. 400 years later, they have named the area after what this man sold in one small shop. Piccadilly Circus, Piccadilly. We're celebrating July 4th, Independence Day, and I hope wherever you are in the world, you're having a good one. Some trivia. Let's talk about some things that happen on Independence Day. Well, on July 4th, every year, descendants of the Declaration of Independence, or the signers of the Declaration of Independence, all of those descendants tap the Liberty Bell 13 times. And this tradition was created many years ago as a way to honour the original 13 colonies. Who was the first state, I wonder if you know this, to make July 4th an official state holiday? Well, in 1781, on July the 3rd, the New England state of Massachusetts made it official. So 1781 was the first time that July the 4th was an official state holiday. Massachusetts was that state. I mentioned hot dogs. Coney Island every year hosts a famous hot dog eating contest on July 4th. It takes place at Nathan's famous Corporation's Original, and it's the best known restaurant in Coney Island. If you can't make it in person, you can actually watch the televised event from home. Who holds the record? Who's the hot dog eating world champion after setting this new record at Nathan's? Well, in 2021, a man named Joey Chestnut ate a record-breaking and indigestion-causing 76 hot dogs and buns. There have been 27 different versions of the US flag. The original flag featured 13 stars and stripes, represented, of course, the original 13 colonies. Today's American flag, of course, features 50 stars and 13 stripes. Who was the first person to sign the Declaration of Independence? Well, his name was John Hancock, and his bold signature became so memorable that his name became synonymous in our country as well with the word signature, as in put your John Hancock on this form. Apple pie has been a staple American dessert since the 1700s. So settlers back in the 1700s, they were looking for new traditions once they arrived to America. One of the ways to reach this goal, to get these traditions simply, was through food, more specifically pastries. And they were leaving behind them their usual British scones and sweets. They were taught how to preserve apples and make pie crust, and that was from the fellow Dutch and German immigrants, a lot of them who came with the British. Of course, earlier versions of apple pie did exist in other countries, but the first recipe for apple pie in America was published in a cookbook in 1796. Now, who has the longest running July 4th parade? Well, that goes to Bristol, Rhode Island. Dates all the way back to 1785. Bristol has held an annual Independence Day celebration, and it's one that the town is known for. So it's considered the oldest celebration to date. Now, who said the phrase, "Give me liberty or give me death"? Well, that famous line was actually one small part of a speech that Patrick Henry gave to Peyton Randolph. And that was March 23rd, 1775. And it was the first formal request for that Virginia colony's right to freedom. Now, it's not officially known who exactly sewed the first American flag, but there is this long-standing belief that it was a woman named Betsy Ross who completed the task at the request of General George Washington. Originally, John Adams predicted that Independence Day would be a huge celebration for many generations to come. He wrote a letter to his wife, Abigail, and he declared all the way back then, the day should be filled with games, sports, parades, and laughter. So what he did by that small letter to Abigail, he basically planned the day for us. Independence Day was once celebrated on July 5th. That was in the year 1779. The holiday fell on a Sunday, and Americans decided to celebrate on the Monday, the 5th of July. Sadly, 3 American presidents have died on the 4th of July. James Monroe, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson all died on this patriotic day. Adams and Jefferson passed away in 1826. Monroe passed 5 years later in 1831. This is something interesting. There are some copies of the Declaration of Independence with a woman's signature on it. Her name was Mary Catherine Goddard. She wasn't one of the official signers in 1776, but the printer and the publisher added her name to the Declaration after she was hired by Congress to print the copies. July the 4th, 1960, the 50th star was added to the American flag, and it symbolized Hawaii's admission as the United States' 50th state. And we celebrate on July 4th, but John Adams thought Independence Day should be celebrated on July 2nd. He had a point, given that the Continental Congress did actually declare its freedom from Great Britain on July 2nd, 1776, but an official document explaining this move, this declaration to the public, wasn't published until 2 days later, on July 4th, 1776. But the Declaration of Freedom actually happened on July 2nd. A lot of people eat hot dogs. Americans consume a lot of hot dogs on July 4th, and why wouldn't you? About 150 million, to be exact. Yep, you read that right. According to the National Hot Dog and Sausage Council, Los Angeles residents alone consume around 30 million pounds of hot dogs on July 4th. So it's safe to say they are the holiday fare for July 4th in much the same way that the turkey is for Thanksgiving. Despite what I thought, what I'm sure a lot of people think, only 2 men signed the Declaration of Independence on July 1776. John Hancock and Charles Thompson. And the rest of the delegates signed within the next few weeks. But it was only 2 originally. There are approximately 16,000 Independence Day firework displays that take place each year in America. It's a bit of a loud celebration, but it's iconic. The custom for firework displays dates back to 1777. And when we look at the costs, over £1 billion, pounds, this is not even dollars, is spent on fireworks every 4th of July. The official holiday of July 4th wasn't an official holiday until almost 100 years after the Declaration was signed. For the first few decades, it wasn't even common to celebrate it or mark this patriotic event. It was established as an official holiday in 1870. In 1776, there were only 2.5 million people living in the United States. And today, around 350 million people. Hospitals, of course, receive a surplus of patients on July 4th every year, most of them due to firework-related injuries. In 2020, an estimated 15,000 people were hospitalized with injuries related to fireworks. Another thing I didn't know, constantly researching and learning, the national anthem was not the Star-Spangled Banner until 1931. It took 117 years for the words written by Francis Key Scott in 1814 to gain federal recognition. Now it is easily one of, if not the most, famous songs in the world. The One World Trade Center building in New York is 1,776 feet tall. The wonderful Liberty Bell, which was made by the Whitechapel Bell Foundry, has not been rung since 1846. The last time the bell was rung properly was on George Washington's birthday, February 1846, when a major crack appeared on the bell. The first newspaper to print the Declaration of Independence was the Pennsylvania Evening Post, and they didn't waste any time. The Declaration was published in the paper's Saturday issue on only July 6th, 1776, and then it was published in other newspapers throughout the colonies. There was even a German translation of it printed, and we all know what it looks like. We've all read it today, but it was published 2 days after it was created. In 1778, George Washington celebrated 4th of July even though he was at war. He treated the American soldiers to a double ration of rum and a cannon salute. Before the Civil War, people who kept their businesses open during the holiday, they were deemed unpatriotic. And then it became more acceptable. It used to be a day where you didn't open, and now there are patriotic 4th of July sales all over America. It's a tradition in New England to eat salmon on the 4th of July. Eating salmon and peas on Independence Day is a New England practice that dates back centuries. Many swear by the recipe. They've made it a staple for the American holiday. There is one US president who was born on the 4th of July, and that's America's 30th president, Calvin Coolidge, July 4th, 1872. There are 31 towns in the US that contain the word liberty, and the largest of them is Liberty, Missouri, with a population of around 35,000. A time capsule originally was buried by Paul Revere and Sam Adams, and it was found more than 2 centuries later by workers fixing a leak. Inside it, they discovered a pine tree shilling coin, a copper medal engraved with an image of George Washington, several newspapers, and a silver plate thought to be engraved by Paul Revere. And here we are at the end of our celebration and our trivia-filled tour on July 4th. I do hope you enjoyed this. As I said at the beginning, to actually come out and do a tour live on July 4th in London this year, 2023, torrential rain, thunder showers. So I've created this about 2 hours before it's due to be shown on YouTube. Do join me again wherever you are in the world. If you have American heritage or you just want to celebrate like I do, have a happy, safe, and freedom and peace-filled July 4th. Lots of love to you all, and I will see you very, very soon. Do subscribe to my channel at Intermission Tours. If you do want to support me in any way, you'll see some links at the top where you can tip or donate or support. Do consider becoming a member at my Buy Me a Coffee site. And then possibly you might every week get extra tours. I also read short stories in the evenings, which I upload regularly. But once again, here we are on Shaftesbury Avenue, outside the Stephen Sondheim Theatre, an American hero, wonderful musical writer with the iconic longest-running musical in the West End, Les Miserables. I'll leave you with this final view of Shaftesbury Avenue on a busy evening, and as we turn round our beautiful Chinatown. Take care.